On August 8, 1984, in the city of Amsterdam in Austria, 18-year-old Elizabeth Fritzl disappeared. Concerned about her daughter Elizabeth's whereabouts, Rosemary, Elizabeth's mother, filed a missing person report with the police in a hurry. For several weeks, there was no news about Elizabeth, and the police were unable to find any trace of her disappearance. This led her parents to fear the worst. Then, out of the blue, a letter arrived from Elizabeth stating that she was fed up with life with her family and had run away. Her father, Joseph Fritzl, told the police officer who came to his house that he had no idea where his daughter would go, but he suspected she might have joined a religious group, as she had previously mentioned. But the truth is that Joseph Fritzl had a clear idea of where his daughter was. In fact, Elizabeth Fritzl was approximately 20 feet underground, right under the location where the police were standing. This is the heartbreaking story of Elizabeth Fritzl, known as the girl trapped in the basement. Let's begin. Today, we're in Austria, and it's in Amsterdam that our story takes place. This city has a lot of history, with tools from the first people living there and lots of historical artifacts being found there. In this city, the majority of the residents are Austrians, and one such family was the Fritzl family, who lived in the lower part of the town. In the family, there were the mother Rosemary, the father Joseph, as well as 3 sons and 4 daughters, including Elizabeth. At first, the family lived very well and happily, especially since the father had several businesses in the city, as well as employment where he could earn enough money to provide for the family's needs. Despite being a hard worker, Joseph Fritzl has a not-so-great past. He's been involved in some pretty shady stuff, like murder suspicions. Fritzl, who's an electrical engineer, started out at voiceover and later worked for another construction company. Then he started selling tech equipment and retired in 1995. He owned some real estate, like a guest house on Lake Monsi. He was running that place until 1996. In 1967, Fritzl attacked a 24-year-old nurse in her home in Linz, raping her and threatening her with a knife. He was also suspected of attempting to rape a 21-year-old woman and was linked to indecent behavior. Fritzl was arrested and served 12 months of an 18-month prison sentence. But under Austrian law, after 15 years his conviction was wiped clean, and he didn't have any trouble adopting Elizabeth. The local authorities didn't notice his criminal record at the time. As it often happens, even if your legal conviction is expunged, people and the police never forget your case until your death, even in Austria. That's why Fritzl came under suspicion several times for various murders in the city. For example, one day, 2 scuba divers on the southern shore of Lake Monsi discovered the body of a young girl who closely resembled Elizabeth, Joseph Fritzl's daughter. At the time of her murder, Fritzl and his wife ran a guest house located opposite the site where the girl's remains were found. In addition to the murder, Fritzl was also considered a suspect in the death of 17-year-old Anna Neumayer. She was killed with a bolt pistol on August 17, 1966 in the field of Linz. She disappeared on the route 35 kilometers away from where Fritzl was working at the time. However, due to a lack of evidence, Fritzl was not charged with these murders. At that time, his daughter Elizabeth, after completing compulsory education at the age of 15, enrolled in waitress courses, which she did not have time to complete. In January 1983, she ran away from home and disappeared to the Austrian capital Vienna with a friend from work. Because she was always afraid of her father, because Fritzl began sexually assaulting Elizabeth when she was only 11 years old. But 3 weeks later, the police found her and returned her to her parents in Amsterdam. She enrolled in waitress courses again, graduated in mid-1984, and was offered a job in nearby Linz. On August 28, 1984, Joseph Fritzl led his daughter into the basement of the family home. He was installing a door in the recently renovated basement and needed assistance to hold it in place. After Elizabeth held the door in position while Fritzl fitted it into the frame, he pressed a cloth soaked in ether against her face until she lost consciousness, and then he threw her into a cell. After Elizabeth's disappearance, Rosemary filed a missing person report. Almost a month later, Fritzl handed a letter to the police, the first of several that he forced Elizabeth to write while she was held captive. The letter, postmarked from Braunau, stated that she was tired of living with her family and had stayed with a friend. She warned her parents not to look for her, or she would leave the country. Her father lied to her mother and the police, telling them stories of how she had run away and joined a cult. Eventually, the police investigation into her whereabouts stalled, and soon the world forgot about Fritzl's missing daughter. But Joseph Fritzl has not forgotten this. For the next 24 years, Fritzl went to the secret chamber almost every day or at least 3 times a week, bringing food and other supplies and repeatedly raping her. During her captivity, Elizabeth gave birth to 7 children. One child died shortly after birth, and 3, Lisa, Monica, and Alexander, were removed from the ward in infancy to live with Fritzl and his wife, who were approved by local social services authorities as their foster parents. To conceal his actions from Rosemary, Joseph Fritzl staged carefully orchestrated discoveries of the children, often involving leaving them in bushes near the house or on the doorstep. Each time, the child was neatly swaddled and accompanied by a note, purportedly written by Elizabeth Fritzl, claiming that she couldn't care for the child and was leaving it in the care of the parents. Remarkably, social services never questioned the appearance of the Fritzl children and allowed the family to keep them. Eventually, officials formed the impression that Rosemary and Joseph were the grandparents of the infants. In August 1988, a girl named Kirsten was born. 2 years later, another child, a boy named Stefan, was born. Kirsten and Stefan remained in the basement with their mother during her captivity, and Joseph brought them weekly supplies of food and water. Elizabeth attempted to educate them with the basic knowledge she possessed and provide them with the most normal life possible under the horrifying circumstances they faced. Joseph convinced Rosemary that every morning at 9, he went into the basement purportedly to draft designs for machines he was selling to manufacturing companies. It's unknown how long Joseph Fritzl intended to keep his daughter captive in the basement. He managed to carry out this horrifying act for 24 years, and as far as the police knew, he planned to continue for another 24 years. However, in 2008, one of the children in the basement fell ill. Elizabeth pleaded with her father to allow her 19-year-old daughter Kirsten to receive medical help. Kirsten had fallen seriously and quickly ill, and Elizabeth was distraught. Reluctantly, Joseph agreed to take her to the hospital. Elizabeth helped him carry Kirsten out of the chamber and saw the outside world for the first time in 24 years. He forced Elizabeth to return to the room, where she had been confined for the past week. Kirsten was transported by ambulance to the local hospital in Amsterdam and admitted in critical condition with life-threatening kidney failure. Later, Fritzl arrived at the hospital and claimed to have found a note written by Kirsten's mother. He discussed Kirsten's condition in the note with the doctor, Albert Reiter. The medical staff found some aspects of Fritzl's story to be mysterious, and on April 21st, they alerted the police. On that day, the police broadcast a plea for the missing mother through the media to come forward and provide information about Elizabeth's medical history. They reopened the case of her disappearance. In his reiterated story, Fritzl claimed that Elizabeth was part of a cult, and he presented what he said was the final letter she had sent him from the town of Kemmington in January 2008. The police then contacted Manfred Wolfe, a church official who specializes in researching cults, who expressed doubts about the existence of the group Fritzl described. He noted that the letters Elizabeth had written seemed to have been dictated and were strangely written. Elizabeth pleaded with Fritzl to take her to the hospital. On April 26th, he released her from the basement along with their sons Stefan and Felix, bringing them upstairs. He and Elizabeth then went to the hospital where Kirsten was being treated on April 26, 2008. After receiving information from Dr. Reiter that Fritzl and Elizabeth were at the hospital, the police detained them on the hospital premises and took them to the police station for questioning. Elizabeth did not give the police more detailed information until she was assured that she would never have to see her father again. During the next 2 hours, she recounted the story of her 24-year captivity. According to Elizabeth, Fritzl had raped her and forced her to watch explicit videos, which he played in front of their children in order to humiliate and demean her. Shortly after midnight, the police had completed their investigation. That evening, Fritzl, age 73, was arrested on suspicion of committing serious crimes against his family members. On the night of April 27, Elizabeth, her children, and her mother Rosemary were taken into custody. The police reported that Fritzl had told investigators how to enter the basement chamber through a small hidden door, which could be opened using a secret access code without a key. Rosemary was unaware of what was happening to Elizabeth. On April 29, it was announced that DNA evidence confirmed Fritzl as the biological father of his daughter's children. His lawyer, Rudolf Mayer, stated that although the DNA test confirmed parentage, evidence for charges of rape and coercion was still required. During a daily press conference on May 1st, the Austrian police revealed that Fritzl had forced Elizabeth to write a letter last year, indicating that he might be planning to release her and the children. The letter stated that she wanted to return home, but it's not possible at the moment. The police believe that Fritzl intended to pretend to rescue his daughter from an imaginary cult. Police spokesperson Franz Palzer stated that they planned to interview at least 100 people who had lived as tenants in Fritzl's apartment building over the past 24 years. Elizabeth and their children began a comprehensive recovery process, both mentally and physically, receiving treatment at a local clinic. The clinic's director stated that Elizabeth and the 3 children who had been held captive in the basement required ongoing therapy to help them adjust to the light after many years in semi-darkness. They also needed treatment to cope with the additional space they now had for movement. However, the situation was complicated by the absence of their daughter Kirsten, who, if you recall, had been in a coma all this time. Kirsten was reunited with her family only on June 8, 2008, when she emerged from the artificially induced coma. Doctors stated that she would fully recover. It turns out Elizabeth and her kids were more affected than initially thought. Kirsten, during captivity, apparently ripped chunks of her hair out and tore her dresses into pieces, then stuffed them down the toilet. Stefan couldn't normally walk because of his height of 5'8", so he had to hunch over in the basement, which was only 5'6". Also, everyday things like dimming lights and closing doors triggered anxiety and panic attacks for Kirsten and Stefan. The other 3 kids raised by Elizabeth's dad are angry and resentful about the events. Elizabeth ordered her mother Rosemary to leave the villa they shared and go to a secret location arranged for them at a psychiatric clinic. Elizabeth was upset by Rosemary's passivity during her upbringing. However, despite the initial strained relationship, Elizabeth and her mother Rosemary started visiting each other more often, and reportedly, Elizabeth forgave her mother for believing her father's stories. As of today, Elizabeth Fritzl, the girl from the basement, lives under a new name in a secret Austrian village known only as Village X. The house is under constant surveillance with video monitoring, and every corner is patrolled by the police. The family does not permit interviews within their walls and declines to provide them themselves. Even though she is now over 50, the last photograph of her was taken when she was just 16 years old. If you liked watching videos in this genre, you should check out these videos. They're also great because they have interesting stories. Now, goodbye, everyone.